So will I go back to youth ministry? Hell no. Will I continue to support youth ministers in every possible way? Hell yes. Hey kids, and welcome to the show. Today's video, I'm going to tell you the truth about why I am no longer doing youth ministry. I did youth ministry for over 17 years in several different areas. I did military youth ministry. I did parish youth ministry. I did mostly Catholic youth ministry, but I even did some Protestant youth ministry here and there. I did itinerant ministry where I traveled around the country speaking to different youth groups in different socio and economic groups, different ethnic groups. I got to do some really cool things. So I'm going to talk to you guys about some of the really amazing things I got to do and why I decided that it wasn't worth it anymore. Well, let's start with this. My first visit out of the country was to this small town in Peru called Piura. There's a really cool priest that was down there doing some mission work. I'm sure he still is. And our parish was doing a mission trip down there. So we went down and got to work with the people. One of the things, this is why, and I don't fault my priest for this. I appreciate this opportunity. He asked me, he goes, Willie, there's a whole lot of youth going on this trip. And we need you to go because, you're the youth minister and we'd like to have you. And I said, I basically said, there's no way. I told him, Pastor, I can't afford it. And he said, no, we'll take care of it. So, God bless him, took care of my passport, took care of all that. And I got to go and do some really cool mission work in Peru. However, as a youth minister, I'm surrounded by a parish of these people that are barely surviving. Whereas I am barely surviving at the time because my pay, although pretty good for my area, Catholic youth ministry pay is terrible. But as I sat there, I realized how wealthy I was. And it was a beautiful experience. When I worked. So not only did I work with the kids afterwards, but during the day when we did the mission work, I worked. What I noticed was a lot of people that paid a lot of the money to go were kind of just there. And they were doing some of the easy stuff like handing out water bottles from a truck. Whereas the youth and myself, who had most of our trips paid for, were the ones in the brickyard carrying stuff and working stuff. And it was wonderful. It was an amazing experience. And I got to build a women's resource center that is, I'm sure, still standing today. And if I ever visit, I'll be able to see it in its full construction, which is pretty exciting. So that's a great experience. I also got the experience to do young adult ministry. I got to go to the Vatican. I got to see the Pope I was from Pope Benedict. I was 20 feet from him. That was pretty cool. Got this really neat picture. Again, most of that trip was covered by my church, my parish. That was an amazing trip. And not only that, I got to go with my wife, my new wife. And we got to go and spend some time in Rome and in Spain, which I have family that came from Spain. I'm still researching that, but some of my family came from Spain. So I got to experience this wonderful experience. But again, I was working the whole time. I had to make sure everybody was where they needed to be. I needed to make sure the monies were paid and all that stuff. It was a wonderful, amazing experience with another pastor, great man, great pastor. But again, working, and having that on my shoulders. So why do I say that? I'm saying why I left youth ministry, and I'm talking about wonderful things about what I experienced in youth ministry. Well, here's the downside to that. Okay, I'm going to turn up my volume just a little bit because the rain has stopped and I don't have to shout as much. See if I'm hitting the right button. Check mic 1, see, yeah. All right, well, I'll have a little drizzle. Thank you. So I'm going to go back. So I'm talking about all these great experiences that I've had, and I can keep naming them. But they all come back to one thing. Someone else had to pay for those experiences. So I was serving a community which was going and having these experiences, but I couldn't afford to have those experiences myself without the aid of the church, which I'm very, very grateful for. However, I would have been much more grateful had I been able to afford to go on those trips myself. And what do I mean by afford to go on those trips? Because I went on those trips, right? Well, on those trips, even though they were amazing experiences, I was an employee on those trips. I was an employee. It was boom, 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 boom. And so those trips were beautiful experiences that I'm very grateful for. Again, but I was an employee. And wouldn't it have been wonderful as a youth minister, who I believe is a very important part of the church, would be paid at least the medium income of the parishioners of that church. However, youth ministers don't. And that medium income for that church in Oklahoma City would have been outrageous for a youth minister. I'll be honest with you, because I happen to be in a very affluent parish, and the median income was very high. But if you took that and took what I got and split it down the middle, I'd probably be the highest paid youth minister in the entire United States, including New York, where they pay a little bit more, but the cost of living is horrible. I know this because I got offered a job out there once, and I quickly said no once I found out what the cost of living was. But I digress. Pay is an important thing. And youth ministers are used to hearing, well, you don't do it for the money. Well, if you don't do it for the money, then perhaps the churches need to start paying for those educations they require. Case in point, most parishes will say, I want a master's degree to teach youth ministry or religious education. I want someone with a master's degree. And they say, here's your $30,000 a year salary, or here's your $40,000 a year salary. Those are very low salaries. If you do the math in your starting salary, you're getting paid just blah. And in a youth ministry job, any kind of parish job, really, the only 9-to-5 job in a parish is typically, there isn't one. There isn't one in a church. So as such, we need to consider that 40-hour a week is not 40 hours a week if you're hustling. Most youth ministers that are doing a good job and know their kids and are staying up to date are working 60 hours a week. And yeah, you might not see them in your office, but they're reading, they're educating themselves, they're getting things prepared. I spent so much time at home just reading and researching because it was a lot easier to read there than it was when I was getting all these interruptions. However, I was a pretty decently paid youth minister, so I am not complaining about the money. However, I need to be an advocate because my wife, who is more educated than me and lived was working for a parish right down the street from me, who again was not a affluent parish like mine. However, she was getting paid a lot less than me, whereas that parish should have probably been paying at least what I was making, So there's a problem and there's a disconnect, because a lot of pastors, and I love most of the pastors I've worked for have been amazing people, and I will never talk negatively about any of them, but there is a disconnect with someone who's never had to pay their own bills, or ever have a mortgage, or have a family, or have, pastors don't get paid very much. Usually it's just a little stipend, but they do get their utilities covered. They get their place to stay covered. They get a lot of things that their employees don't. So when a pastor is making $19,000 a year and their youth minister is making $25,000 a year, but their youth minister has a family and it doesn't matter if they have a family, they just have themselves, and they have a mortgage and they have all that other stuff, which leaves them to the point where a lot of youth ministers have part-time jobs. Part-time jobs when a lot of pastors want them to be in the office from 9 to 5, even though the youth ministers sometimes have to be at the school at 6, and then at the office at 8, and then back at the office at 9. And then later that evening, they got to be back in for a religious education class, or they got to be back in for a youth group, or they have to be back in for whatever. They have to be back in because the projector doesn't work. Okay? It's a team. Yes. It needs to be a team that is treated with respect. Number one, pay needs to be addressed. And not only for youth ministry, but church employees across the board. We, as a Catholic Church, talk about justice. And yet we pay our employees a really poor wage. And the thing is, if you pay your employee what they are worth, and they don't have to take a part-time job, you're going to get more out of them. And if you don't, somebody else is going to want to take that position. So stop being loyal, not only to a parish that is abusing you, or a church that is abusing you. I say parish because I'm Catholic, but this really goes for anybody. Don't be loyal to a church that's abusing you. And don't expect a minister, a youth minister, a lay minister, a lay employee to be loyal to a fault. Because up until now, it's kind of been that. Okay, secondly, youth ministers are a weird breed of lay minister. A little different than a DRE. And let me explain to you why. A DRE is an educator. It is awesome. They are 100% an educator. That is their vocation. And it's really easy. You have curriculums, you have metrics, you have all that stuff. So there is a balance. A youth minister is more of what that is, a minister. They are more of an artist because they tend to not necessarily be able to go by the books. They have to know the information so well that they can translate it into today's culture. And so it's a different profession. So a youth minister really looks at that as a vocation. And it's not, but many look at it as such. Some men look at it as a stepping stone to the priesthood. Some women look at it as a stepping stone to sisterhood, nun life. It's a beautiful stepping stone. Some of them, and this is true, I don't care if you get mad at me because this works both ways, but some people go into youth ministry to find a spouse. And I know that sounds weird, but it's true. And I've heard guys that go into youth ministry to find themselves a nice, lovely lady at church, and I've heard the opposite. So some youth ministers go in for a spouse, they get married, and they say, okay, done. And they step off. So, and then there's those that just really love their ministry and have completely devoted their life to it. That was me. I devoted my life. I used to say, my goal in life was to die one day. I wanted to die on a retreat one day. Just found on a retreat because I expected to do youth ministry my entire life. And that was before I got jaded and realized that many of the people that work in the church are not really churchgoers, if you know what I mean. They're not really showing their best foot forward. And it is sometimes a very toxic environment. And for a youth minister who oftentimes is very young, and this is the thing, I'd be ancient as a youth minister right now. But youth ministers right out of college have all this college debt, and they get the first job they want. They're making nothing, and they are just ready to serve. They know it's a vocation. They're praying every day. They're praying. A lot of youth ministers do the divine office that the priests do. There aren't any real resources for youth ministers, and then they so have to create them, and they're still creating them. And there's really no resources for lay ministers or lay employees in the Catholic Church. They have to be created by the person there. That's why some people succeed really well and some people don't. So then you're in this culture. It can be very toxic. You have someone that's been there for 30 years that doesn't want anything changed. They don't want a curtain moved. They don't want that chair moved. They don't want the upholstery moved. And then you have this 25-year-old youth minister that comes in and says, all right, guys, we're going to have a shaving cream party because that's what I did when I was in youth group, and that's what we're going to do. Instead of appreciating what our church offers and using that experience to further our faith. And it was really hard to do that as a creative youth minister because you're stifled, and which is one of the reasons I love doing retreat ministry, because as a youth minister, if I did a retreat, I would get that parish to basically pay for everything and it's done, right? So I would travel to that parish and do this wonderful retreat and then come back. The cool thing was, not only was I getting that parish to pay for me to go do this retreat, my youth group itself was a proving ground for all these activities. And they knew it. They knew I used to travel around. So they'd say, what are we going to do today? I'm like, well, I want to try this game. And my wife would come up with games and stuff. And that was kind of our ministry. We'd come up with stuff. And it was nice. But then one day someone said something. And this is a hard one. This is tough. Because this was the day I knew that I was done in youth ministry. I don't remember exactly where it was, and it was in my head, so I didn't say it out loud. I believe it was at a staff meeting, and someone looked over at me and said, we need to probably do this, pertaining to one of the events that I was in charge of. And this was about a year before I finally left and decided to do my business, but this was kind of when I started saying, I might need to think of something else. Someone said something, and in my head I said, well, we've always done it like this. Those are the fatal words of any lay minister in the church. Well, we've always done it like this. Because that means all your creativity is gone. There's nothing left. When you say, well, we've always done it like this, what you're saying is, it's perfect, can't be better. All right, there are some exceptions to that. But when it comes to lay ministry in the church, and you say, well, we've always done it like that, that's when you need to step away. It's just time to step away. So that was when I knew it was time for me to step away, because immediately I realized my creativity is not where it used to be. So for me, I had to find a new creativity and a new profession, and I decided to do a new profession. However, I never stopped serving. I have lots of love for the different types of ministry that I did. A lot of work with the homeless ministry, and I continued to do that until I became disabled for that time. And this is an amazing story, and I love this. Okay, since I've lived out here, since I've been disabled, I've had one of my youth group kids from Kansas City is a veterinarian now, and I'm not going to say his name, but he's a doctor. I'm so proud of him. And we had no money. We couldn't get a vet to come out here. We couldn't get the dog in the car because it was one of those big old dogs, and we needed to get him in the car. And it was just a bad way. And that kid just gave us some advice. I showed him a picture, and he goes, looks like that's a fence. It's not too bad. If it gets infected, you're going to have to get him to the hospital. But he was able to help me. And I said, I wish I could pay you. He's like, you can't pay me. You can't. He goes, it's illegal. I can't. He's not my patient. I'm just giving you advice as a friend. And I said, I love that he has that integrity now, because I love the integrity. And I said, I wish there was a way that we could repay you. And he said, no, you were a big part of me growing up. And it's 25 years ago. It was a pretty big deal. And I've needed help on the house the last few months. And don't you know it, some old youth group kids that just found me on Facebook were out here swinging hammers. It's pretty stinking awesome. So will I go back to youth ministry? Hell no. Will I continue to support youth ministers in every possible way? Hell yes. And this is how I can support youth ministers. If you need an idea, if you need some encouragement, reach out to us. I will do it for free. No charge if you're really asking for help. My whole ministry is about family. And the thing is, I cuss too much to do this full time. I can hold my tongue when I'm doing little things, but this is a resource. Some of these videos are going to be resources for you. So in the comments, tell me what you want me to talk about, and I will make these youth ministry videos based on a devout Catholic that hates institutions. And yeah, go figure. So I despise the institution of the church, but I am a devout Catholic, and I am thankful for the traditions of our church. However, I will call them as I see them. And when it comes to mistreatment of my fellow brothers and sisters in youth ministry, I'm letting you know now, my voice is yours. Use it if you want. Have a great day, work hard, be kind, have fun.